Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How Brandworkz Built High Performance, Simple, Scalable Storage. This is a case study and a solution overview brought to you by Zadara and AWS and Brandworkz. Thank you very much for joining us. It's 8:02. I believe everybody's had a chance to log in, and so we're going to get started. Today's speakers are Noam Shendar, VP of GM Cloud and General Manager of Cloud and Hyperscale Business here at Zadara. Henry Axelrod, a Solution Architect, a Senior Solution Architect at AWS. And Jens Lundgaard, CEO and Founder of Brandworkz. Today we're going to be talking about a number of topics. Excuse me for my slide work here. I apologize. We are going to be talking about evolving storage needs and take a quick overview of the industry and what's happening. Many of you, I'm sure, will be seeing points that you've experienced yourselves. We'll take a look at Brandworkz' challenges, and we will take an overview of the AWS platform. Many of you may already be using that platform, but you may not be familiar with everything that it can do. And we'll take a look at the value proposition when you combine AWS and Zadara. And then we'll take a deeper dive into the solution that was created for Brandworkz and with Brandworkz using AWS and Zadara. And then finally, of course, we'll make time for a little bit of Q&A. So that's the agenda today. We hope that you enjoy it. With that, we'd like to get started with an overview of the industry, and I'd like to hand that off for this portion of it to Noam Shendar.
Thank you very much, Greg, and good morning, everyone, to those of you in U.S. time zones, and good afternoon if you're dialed in from European time zones. To start us off, as Greg said, let's talk a little bit about industry trends, just to synchronize everybody on the context for this presentation. The first one to talk about is the shift from storage management to data management, and really it's the shift from volumes to value-added services. So whereas traditionally customers, users, developers looked at using storage, today it's really about the data and what to do about the data. So it's not just about storing the data, but about protecting it, about extracting value from it, and about moving it or putting it where it needs to be. The next trend is software-defined storage and virtualization. In order to achieve this higher level of value, going from storage management to data management, we see the advent of software-defined storage, which is more flexible, more affordable, more configurable, and underneath it, virtualization layer to make it easier to manage and to make the software and the platform less hardware dependent and more agnostic. The next trend is flash-based and hybrid media storage systems. Here is where new technologies are making it more affordable, simpler, and more reliable to get more and more sustained performance and more consistent performance, and especially where it comes to flash, and where hybrid storage media systems, they mix flash and hard drives in order to achieve the best price performance point that will balance performance with cost, whereas flash is performance driven and hard drives are capacity driven. In all of that, tiering is still king. Tiering is not a new concept, but it's, if anything, it's becoming more powerful with many tiers. Historically, there have been two tiers, a hard drive tier and a flash tier. Now we're seeing many intermediate tiers in between and above and below, providing very fine-grained control of price versus performance. Unstructured data management and analysis is referring to the fact that most data is unstructured, which means files of various kinds, and it historically has and continued to occupy about 80% of the data in the enterprise. That's a lot of data, and more and more generated each year in terms of tens of exabytes per year, and the need to manage that data and be able to extract value from it is only becoming more important. You're probably here because of the next point. The cloud is making giant inroads. If you go back 10 years, it was a non-factor. If you look at it today, there's hardly a company on the planet that isn't taking advantage of the cloud. And in the storage arena, this is no different. The amount of money spent per year on cloud storage versus all money spent on storage is actually approaching 50%, according to most analysts out there. And last, all of this needs to be done in a compliant fashion with many regulations that are coming into being. For example, GDPR in Europe, but that affects any company that may have customers or employees in Europe. So it basically affects most companies on the planet, and there are more regulations on the horizon. For example, California is close to passing its own version of GDPR. All right, and Greg, you may need to advance for me. I'm not getting a screen update here.
I do. Why don't I do that for everybody today? I'll take care of advancing.
Perfect. So what I'd like to, thank you, Greg. What I'd like to do here is to hand over to Jens to talk about a little bit about Brandworkz and introduce how storage, what they do, how storage needs look like from Brandworkz's perspective, and then that'll set up the discussion here about how to address all of the requirements that companies like Brandworkz have. Yes, please.
Thanks, Noah. Yeah, so in a nutshell, we're a software developer, SaaS-based, clouds, and what we help our clients with is for them to maintain and build a strong, consistent brand everywhere. Doesn't sound particularly relevant for some financial people, so I'd just like to remind people like that whenever I go anywhere that it actually makes a huge difference in terms of price premium typically, and of course there's lots of other benefits. Just a super quick snapshot of what we do. The software is, in terms of files, the main needs we have is a digital asset management module, which is where we manage people's visual files, images, videos, documents, so forth, dynamic templates, approval workflow, brand guidelines, brand showcase. But of course, you don't just build a brand by slapping a logo on a cup and charging twice as much for it. Hence we manage in excess of 100 million files for our clients, and that's where Zadara comes in. So Greg, if you know, next slide. Yep. So a couple of years ago, we moved to Amazon from another provider. And we're very glad we did. Love Amazon, everything about it. I don't want to own a piece of hardware ever again. I'll leave that to Amazon and Zadara. So in terms of how we provide our SaaS service, it's a web-based system. We got web application service, but we also have a lot of peaks and troughs on image transcoding, video transcoding. We use auto scaling for both, which then means that you're getting a lot of I/O once it starts scaling up. So if we're scaling out to 50 or 100 CPUs for video transcoding, if a client's uploading a lot of files that maybe needs transcoding to 10 different permutations, and that might be a 4K file, that's a lot of I/O. And over to the right, of course, we got Zadara, where we're using RAID 10, which we chose. And I'll go back to why that was a little bit later under kind of why we ended up with Zadara. Next slide, please, Greg. So I've already touched upon it a little bit, but first of all, we needed high performance scalable storage because it's anybody's guess how much I/O, how much growth, how much pretty much anything to do with files, that will happen in any one day, because we don't decide that, our clients decide that, so we got to respond. But also we don't have, you know, massive overheads of keeping lots and lots of idle resources all the time, which is expensive. We also have a mixed environment, so we run, you know, Linux, but for some service we have to run Windows, because the software we use for, let's say, InDesign or stuff like that, it only runs on Windows. We knew that we wanted RAID for redundancy. We also need to provide a low resource point objective, as it's called. Basically, if Amazon were to fail, which they haven't, and I hope they don't ever, we need to know that we can get to those files very, very quickly, so our clients don't start shouting at us too much. And of course, online expansion, so we can in turn provide that to our clients. Just a couple of sort of examples of sort of peaks, if you like. So, you know, we might have a client that's got a global launch of something, so that might create, you know, tens of thousands of downloads in a couple of hours. They might have 1,000 uploads, which of course for Amazon is nothing, but you know, for us it's quite a big deal if they're 4K video files of an hour length, let's say, and they all need transcoding as fast as possible. You might have, you know, tens of thousands of users. We have lots of tiny files for preview, but then we also have massive files up to about 50 gigabytes each. Okay, so that's sort of our challenge, and then I'll hand over to Amazon.
Thanks for that, Jens, and great to hear about a little bit more about how Brandworkz is using AWS. So real quickly, I just wanted to go over some of the AWS storage services that are available, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the benefits of AWS. So real quickly, we offer storage services that vary and are kind of the building blocks of you know, a lot of our different partner solutions as well. So the first one that you may be most familiar with is Amazon S3, which is our highly durable object storage platform, and many partners utilize this, including you know, Zadara for, you know, many different use cases. Zadara, for example, you know, does backups to S3. We also have Glacier for long-term retention. We have block storage options, you know, such as Amazon Elastic Block Storage, or EBS, as well as our EC2 Instance Store. We also have a file storage service called Amazon Elastic File System, or EFS, that provides a NFS v4 compatible interface. Also, since as was mentioned there earlier in the webinar, there's lots of data out there, lots of data that needs to be transferred, perhaps from various locations, including on-premises locations, and AWS offers a variety of data transfer services to help manage that data, you know, in and out of the AWS cloud, including things like physical devices like Snowball, Direct Connect to allow connectivity between your data center and the AWS cloud, S3 acceleration to allow for faster transfers over the wide area network. Now I just want to quickly go over some of the benefits of AWS. If we want to go to the next slide. So what are some of the things that kind of set AWS apart? Oh, I think we advanced one too many. Okay. So one of the you know, big things that kind of set AWS apart is the security, right? We offer very fine-grained security controls. I think was mentioned earlier in the webinar. You know, there's a lot of compliance and governance concerns. You know, when you think about, you know, managing data and having access to data, AWS offers, you know, over 50 industry recognized certifications and accreditations that are, you know, internationally recognized. Anything from, you know, SOC 1, SOC 2, SOC 3, FedRAMP compliance, as well as others. We have a huge amount of services, over 125 different services to utilize. We have, the experience over, 1 million plus active customers at every given time, as well as a global footprint to allow, companies like Brandworkz to be able to deploy servers around the globe within minutes. We also enable, advanced functionality like machine learning, and have many partners that we work with, like Zadara, to really provide the best options to our customers. We're also kind of a leader, a consistent leader within the enterprise. So these are just some of the things that our customers really find beneficial for utilizing AWS. And on that, I think I'll hand it back to the Zadara team.
Thank you so much, Henry, and also thank you, Jens, for walking us through Brandworkz and AWS respectively. So now let's do the predictable next step, which is then let's talk a little bit about Zadara and how that fits into this picture. And looking at the next slide, I really wanted to start with a short summary. So I am only allowed to name 3 reasons for using Zadara with AWS, here they are. The first one is that all protocols are supported with a single product, so a single product that supports CIFS/SMB for Windows environment and NFS for Linux environments, and the iSCSI for block storage for both of those environments. And in the Windows context, there is Active Directory integration. So this is a single service that supports all file and block storage needs obviously with unified management and with a unified billing. The second reason out of 3 to use Zadara is isolated infrastructure. The underlying resources are actually dedicated on a per customer basis, meaning that there is no possibility of noisy neighbor effects because there's no commingling of the data or of the processing of that data. And that includes dedicated physical drives, which allows for some neat things like the ability to move those drives physically from place to place. For example, they can be overnighted from one coast to the other coast. And then and also there's a high-speed, dedicated, redundant fiber connection to AWS with extremely low latency, but using AWS's Direct Connect infrastructure, which is another great service from AWS, and a service we at Zadara have been using for 7 years with reliability, with consistent reliability. And actually, we are the largest user of this service around the world because we use Direct Connect across 14 different AWS regions. Third point out of 3 is tiering and data protection. I mentioned how important tiering is before, and tiering is useful not only for achieving price versus performance trade-offs, but also the ability to migrate data for data protection. So, for example, there's a built-in backup to S3 capability that takes live data, puts it in S3, and creates an independent backup in an independent medium, and allows for instant restore from S3. So, best of all worlds: the reputation of S3, the independence of S3, the cost of S3, but without sacrificing the ability to have immediate and instant access to the data. If we go to the next slide, please, what does this add up to? Is really the best of both worlds. So the power of enterprise data storage, the same features one would expect from a traditional storage system that I'll cover very shortly, but without any of the headaches of a traditional storage system. Purely as a service, completely on demand, elastic in all directions, meaning more or less capacity and more or less performance as needed. With no ability to make a mistake, everything is undoable. Everything that the cloud is good at, yet it's as functional as the traditional storage systems that we've been using for 2 decades, and we know and we love. But we wish that they would be easier to use, and that they wouldn't be so rigid, so we wouldn't be stuck with them for an extended period of time. That's the power of enterprise data storage with the convenience of the cloud. if we go to the next slide, to summarize what we call enterprise storage as a service, and what we provide and have been providing for over 7 years now, is something we abbreviate any data type, block, file, or object, any protocol. You can see them listed here. So we're talking about block and file and object protocols, any location at AWS, on premises, or even both at the same time, with the ability to change. If you are looking to start out of the cloud, but you know that you're going to be migrating into the cloud at the point in the future, this is a way to get the convenience of cloud on premises with the built-in ability to move the data into AWS whenever you would like to, when you're ready. The next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, there are enterprise storage features built into the Zadara service, and these are features that have historically been in on-premises devices, and also historically were not easy to find in a cloud context. But no longer, these are available in a cloud context with all the convenience of cloud. And to go through some of them, for example, the ability to thinly provision volumes, the ability to create very large volumes, the ability to have multi-site redundancy, be it across multiple zones or even across multiple regions, with failover and failback capability from the primary region to the secondary region and back. And the ability to support database clustering, for example, and the ability to take any data encrypted with customer managed keys, both at rest and in flight. These are the types of features, and this is a summary only. There are more features built in as well, like deduplication, like compression, and so forth, that again are common on premises and more difficult to find in cloud environments. But thanks to Zadara and thanks to the great collaboration with AWS, those are available to AWS customers now. It has been for, as I mentioned, more than 7 years, and across 14 different regions for AWS. If we go to the next slide, please. There's another very important capability to the service, and one that also relates to the topic today of making complex environments possible and easy to manage. And this one is what we call multi-tenant efficiency and single-tenant experience. Again, traditionally something that used to be too good to be true, but is no longer. So here's the ability to take a shared storage platform, but divide it in such a way that it does not have shared resources on a per tenant basis, which means that every tenant has a single tenant experience. Every user, every customer is in control of their own destiny. They have direct control of physical drives. They have an isolated storage environment that has the features performance isolation and consistent performance because of the lack of sharing. And each such environment is self-contained, autonomous, and inelastic in all directions. And what you can see in this diagram here is how two tenants can coexist within the same shared infrastructure without ever colliding into each other. It's as if they live in parallel universes, each in full control of their own destiny, each with full visibility into where their data lives, down to the spindle or SSD, and yet with the full convenience of cloud. If we go to the next slide, please. I mentioned that AWS is available, the Zadara is available in 14 regions of AWS. They're listed here on the left side of the screen. That means that it is all of AWS's regions except the two newest ones, and we are expanding into those as well, and continue to follow AWS's expansion as we've been doing for the past 7+ years. The point being, wherever you need us, including GovCloud and including AWS China, we are available to provide the capabilities that we've all been describing here.
Okay, so I think
yes, please go ahead. Yes.
Right. Yes, it's Jens here again. Yeah, so I was just going to give a quick overview of why we ended up with Zadara, because of course the natural choice when we moved to Amazon was to go, great, one provider can provide everything. Amazon does a lot of storage options. One of them must be right for us, but it wasn't so easy. That's not to say that they aren't good. I mean, they're great for each of their own use cases. It's just that we had requirements that meant that we couldn't actually use any of them without significant amount of re-engineering anyway. So S3, I guess the natural choice for a lot of cloud providers. Our software does not support that. We need an old school volume NFH or SMB. And object storage was not something we could support in our software, and there's various other things with S3 which may not make it appropriate for us. Then there's elastic block storage, but we have large files and we need large volumes, and they max out at 16 terabytes, which of course is quite a lot, but we needed more. And also, certainly at the time, you could only connect one server to it, which was no good for us, unless we'd started having some kind of NAS head type situation where we had a EC2 server in front and then connect through that like a file server, which we didn't really want to do. Then there's various cloud RAID, I think it's called, either open source or third party, where they sort of sit as a RAID layer on top of a bunch of EBS, which then provides not only redundancy, which we need, but also more speed potentially, and better connectivity. But frankly, we found it very confusing, at the time anyway, and not sure it's changed much. The open source ones, we found them very hard to configure, and if we hit a roadblock, we didn't really know where to turn, apart from starting to scour the internet for blog posts. And also the pricing was quite difficult to understand for the commercial ones. So it just seemed too much hassle to go down that route. Then there's EFS as well. It wasn't there at the time, but I believe it only supports Linux, certainly when I checked last, where I think it's probably great if you have sort of smaller needs, or you want to highly scale up and scale downable, so to speak. We seem to only scale up. So anyway, that was out as well for us for that reason. So we then found Zadara, which could in fact answer all of the sort of above needs we had, and also it felt like we could sort of have them as a partner rather than maybe just a sort of faceless vendor, where they would always be happy to offer support and solutions to stuff. As invariably there will be issues where either we run something hot, or we have new needs, so we want to swap the drives, so we just moved to 10 terabyte drives, so now we're getting more storage for the same price, which is great. So yeah, that was quite a big factor as well, and we've been with them for a couple of years, and we're very good, very good partnership, I'd say. Yeah, so next slide, please. So what we're actually using from Zadara. So like I said, we're not connecting to old school volumes through SMB and NFS from Windows and Linux servers. We have RAID array with quite a lot of SSD on it, or VSPA in Zadara terms, I think it's called, which gets some extra speed, plus we're buffering with CloudFront for popular files. We also have started using their S3 snapshot, backing up of snapshot, backup stroke snapshot feature, which actually is really great. We were using a third-party backup tool for backing up to S3, and it was a nightmare. We got more and more files. It took days to complete a job, and our DR was not very clean in terms of being able to get these files online, because it's one thing having them on S3, but of course that doesn't mean we can actually use them, since we need a network share. So we've started using the built-in backup to S3 option, which is really great. We've tested DR. You can basically sort of rewind time to any of the snapshot points and basically mount the S3. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Noah, but I think you're actually backing up the changed blocks to S3 storage, so you're kind of using it as a kind of virtualized block storage, yes, if you like, on object storage, which then means that you can essentially mount a disk from X amount of days ago as you want. So it's not just for DR, it's also, if somebody's deleted some files that you need, which for us was important because there's a lot of block backup options there, but then you can only retrieve the whole disk, which would be a nightmare for us because it might be dozens of terabytes. Which essentially give us, mirroring, if you like. So we moved to 10 terabyte hard disk, so we got, lots of storage for good price. We got RAID 10, I think, with a hot spare as well. By the way, it's not on the slide, but I quite like knowing what's good, what's going on under the hood, so to speak. So, even though it's cloud and you don't have to run any hardware, we kind of understand what's going on. You can decide on the RAID level you want, because everything at the end of the day is a balance between price, performance, and speed. And you sort of get a choice of how much scalability, stroke redundancy you want versus, your monthly bill. So I like that. And also we have isolated QA, dev, and prod. So we have, in fact, 3 direct connects to Amazon. By the way, on that, we were initially worried about the speed, because obviously it's not actually Amazon. It's a third-party vendor, and strictly speaking. But I think we measured the latency to something like 3 milliseconds on direct connect, so it's pretty negligible, in terms of any speed penalty. And then in the future, or near future, in fact, we're, once we're sort of looking at something, I think Zadara is sort of pretty much looking at it already, or maybe have launched something, or will be launching something. So, native support for Docker, which is something we're looking at. Obviously, everybody looking at SSD. Well, it's not necessarily the best for all use cases because of cost. So yeah, so there's a roadmap that we're kind of, relying on, and know that they're probably thinking about stuff at a similar sort of time as us in terms of new things. So that's what we use with Zadara. Oh, just one more slide. Yeah, this is just up on the map. This is basically showing the backup to S3. So we have, for instance, financial clients in the US and in the EU where we're not allowed to get the data out of the country or the region. So we can solve that nicely by having a full DR, including the data within the same region. So yeah, for safe harbor and GDPR reasons. Okay. So Norm, I think you're going to round off. I think you're on mute.
I am, sorry. So I think it's really cool to start to, just before I get to the summary slide, of bringing up these really complex requirements, which are rather demanding, and they're rather diverse, and they're rather strict, and then seeing how, when we combine the AWS capabilities with the Zadara capabilities, we can meet all of these requirements. I think it's remarkable, and I really enjoyed hearing from Jens firsthand what he did in order to meet all of his needs. And so now to bring it together in terms of why a company like Brandworkz and why hundreds of other companies are doing the same with AWS and Zadara. So first reason, additional choices and flexibility. So go when you need when you have these elevated requirements and you need to do more, this is what Zadara makes available to you. Go beyond the volume. So it's not just about the volume. It's about the features that are attached to the volume. It's about the visibility into the volume. It's about the reliability that you can add on top of the volume. Hard drive and SSD tiering, again, get only as much performance as you need. Don't pay for performance that you don't need, and also ability to move. Data can become hot or cold over time, so put the data where it needs to be, and with many choices, including the AWS choices that Henry covered. That provides a very elaborate and complete menu of choices. Region to region disaster recovery setup. It's, for most companies, this is a non-negotiable requirement. It could be because of regulations like Sarbanes-Oxley in the US. It could be because of environmental threats, be they earthquakes, typhoons, hurricanes, and so forth. Strict data sovereignty. We just heard from Jens. He likes knowing what's happening under the hood. So Zadara makes this possible. Know where your data lives down to the spindle or SSD. Know that there are no shadow copies that you may be unaware of. Know that the data only lives in the country that you want it to live, and data only moves with your explicit command from one region to another, with full control over which region or regions to use. And in essence, be in control. Enjoy a service with a strong SLA where it just works, so to speak, but at the same time, you can open the hood, look inside the hood or the bonnet for our UK audience, and see what's inside, and know what's happening, with the ability to meter and log and of course alert and make changes as needed. So at this point, first, appreciate everybody's attention to the three of us. I hope you learned something new, and I also hope that you have questions. And what I'm going to do is hand over back to Greg, who introduced all of us, and he will describe how to submit questions, and then we'll collect them from you. Greg?
Thank you, Noam. Everybody, I hope you enjoyed listening to Brandworkz describe their challenges. I did. I learned a little bit more, even though Brandworkz is our customer. We know them. I learned more today, so thanks. And I learned a little bit more about AWS as well and what we do with them. I hope everybody found it interesting. I do have some questions coming in. For those of you that are interested in submitting a question, you can do that right through the control panel in GoToWebinar. There's a text section over there on your control panel. I see some questions have already come in, and let me answer the first question that came in, because I can answer this one. Somebody asked, can I have a copy of this presentation? And the answer, of course, is yes. After this webinar is over, we will put a copy of this presentation onto our website where you can access it, and I'll make sure that an email is sent to all attendees and those who registered so that you can go and grab it and download it for your use. We have a few more questions already coming in, so let me tee those up. There's some good ones here. What is the supported bandwidth for Direct Connect links? Is a question I'll put out to the group. Who would like to answer that?
Sure, I can go ahead and answer it. Oh, or no, if you want to answer, it's fine.
Yeah, and because I can go beyond I can answer both in terms of what AWS provides and then how much we provision from AWS. So the single Direct Connect link maxes out at 10 gigabits. Our minimum installation is a pair of redundant active Direct Connect links. So at any region, we have a minimum of 20 gigabits per second of bandwidth, and we increase bandwidth ahead of demand. So for example, in US East, which is both AWS's largest region and our own largest region, we have 40 gigabits of provisioned bandwidth.
Excellent. And there is another question about the connection between AWS and Zadara, and that is the cost for egress covered by the customer or by Zadara?
And another very good question. The cost of egress is charged by AWS to the customer. So the answer is customer. Egress in the US is charged, and also in Dublin, for example, where Brandworkz has one of their main sites, is charged at 2 cents per gigabyte. This is only for writes, because it's egress. So if you think of egress and ingress in terms of storage, Egress means writes and ingress means reads. Reads are free, writes are 2 cents per gig. Our average across all customers in terms of egress charges is only $50 per month. And the reason for that is that most applications are read heavy and write light. So for most customers, egress is not an issue. In corner cases, it can be more, and we work with our customers to make sure that they have the most cost-effective total cost available to them. So that may mean that we recommend, you know what, in this case, it's better to run something inside the AWS cloud because the egress charges would be high, or we find a way to optimize the writes in order to reduce the amount of egress that is traveling across the fiber.
Very good. There's a question here about Docker containers and other advanced features. Where can I get more information about what Zadara can do? I'll provide a brief answer. Noam, you might want to elaborate on this, but if you do visit our website, you'll find information on our solutions for Docker containers, as well as some other advanced features. And I think, as Jens alluded to, and as we were talking about with Henry, we've been working together with AWS for a long time and working on always upgrading and continuing to provide those advanced features that we know our customers are looking for. So you can find a little bit more information on our website if you're interested. And Noam, if you choose to, you may want to elaborate on some of those here, but it's up to you.
Sure. Yeah, 2 more points. Point number 1, you can see for technical detail. So our website will provide you feature level information. If you're looking for detailed technical manual, all of our manuals are available at guides.zadara. Greg, you'll have to correct me if you updated the URL, but I believe they're still active at guides.zadarastorage.com. So guides plural, GUIDES.zadarastorage.com, and you can see specifically how to operate the Docker capabilities and what that entails. The second point I think is even more important, and that is we're available to you live to consult on any questions or potential projects that you have. So we want to speak with you. We don't take the tack that because all the documentation is available online, then you should solely rely on that. And in fact, we would rather if you had to choose between speaking with us and reading the manual, we prefer that you speak with us. So live engineers in at least 4 countries around the world, in the US, in the UK, in India, and in Israel are available to you to answer any questions you have, no matter how detailed about the Docker capability or any other capability. And the way to reach them is either through our sales alias or through our support alias. So sales@zadarastorage.com or support@zadarastorage.com.
Excellent. I'm smiling as I read this next question, or really a set of related questions, because we get this more often than you might think. It says here, terrific presentation. I'm still not quite clear on exactly what Zadara does or is. Is it purely software? Is it software plus hardware? And I'm smiling because we are a bit different than you might find elsewhere. And so maybe it's worth it to go through it one more time. Noam, you do a fine job of explaining this more clearly than I could. Maybe you can walk through exactly how we are, in fact, both hardware and software.
Yes. So we are many things. So primarily we are a service. Our service is realized through a combination of software and hardware. The software is software-defined storage that we develop. The hardware is standard commercial off-the-shelf hardware. And we take that hardware and we place it in 2 types of locations. around the world. One type you saw on the map, these are the 14 AWS regions that we currently operate in. By placing in AWS regions, I mean we put them in the nearest co-location facility, one that is typically 1 or 2 milliseconds away from the virtual machines running inside AWS. So it's practically local latency, again, 1 to 2 milliseconds from round trip time from the instance to the storage. The second type of location that we place them in is your private premises. So we take the exact same hardware, running the exact same software, providing the same SLA at the same price to customers who have on-premises installations or hybrid, meaning cloud plus on-premises installations. And we do this again as a service on demand, elastically, and so forth. So the summary is software plus hardware delivered together as a service, both at AWS and on premises.
Thank you. Excellent. I hope that clears it up. We are running out of time here. I know we're running up against the time we allotted for this. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to be with us. We do have one last question I think we can get to in the few minutes we have left. We have a question here about a comparison between offerings seen from NetApp, Cloud Volumes, they're called, and other similar offerings on Cloud Volumes from Nimble and others. This is not necessarily a webinar about that. We can get into more detail about that in we have webinars and information on that topic elsewhere, but it's a fair question, and perhaps we can address it briefly here in the couple of minutes we have left. Noam, you want to take a stab at a distinction between some of these offerings? There's certainly a lot of activity in the market these days.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I'll begin by saying it's a fine service. So let's just draw differences. It is a volume service. It's a 3-tier volume service, so one can provision for themselves a volume from one of those tiers. If you remember the slide that I showed about what sets Zadara apart, so I'll focus on those points. One is no shared infrastructure. So these are dedicated. We provide a dedicated single-tenant environment that's on demand using dedicated physical resources, which provides more control, more consistency of performance, more privacy, and much easier compliance, given that the physical drives are not shared, for example, among customers, meaning that those drives can be, as some of our customers do, destroyed physically at the end of their useful life. So one is the dedicated infrastructure on demand as opposed to a shared infrastructure. Second is the fact that we provide exactly the same everything, both on premises as in the cloud. In fact, we're the only vendor to have this capability. Whether you're using us at AWS or on premises, it's exactly the same. It's the same software, it's the same hardware, it's the same price, it's the same performance, it's the same capabilities, same features, same SLA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's no difference, and as a result, there's a consistent experience and a ability to create a custom environment, a custom hybrid environment, and also change that environment. For example, load balance between how much data is living in the cloud versus how much data is living on the premises, and rebalance over time as needed. So those are two key differences, and I'll add that we're also recognized for exceptional level of support, which is one reason why I encourage people during the Docker question to come to us. We are extremely approachable, extremely available, and that's part of our ethos, and it sets us apart from many other companies that while they do a respectable job, that they don't make it a central pillar of their offering. And for us, it is absolutely at the core of what we do.
Thank you, Noam. I'm going to use that as a quick segue to summarize. The reason that we chose to put this webinar together is that we really believe that our mission and our way of doing things meshes so well with AWS that when you look at our offering, it really is a 1 + 1 = 3 kind of an offering. And it's important. Right now, people, all of us are looking at how we're going to go about our jobs, and there's not one simple solution out there. The ability to work with AWS and all the wonderful things it has to offer together with Zadara, we believe it brings the kind of flexibility and power to the market that people are looking for. I want to thank everybody for participating today. Henry, thank you. Jens, thank you. Noam, thank you. I hope everybody that tuned in found this useful. And again, we will post a copy of this presentation and send an email to all attendees so that you can download it if you like. Once again, if you have questions, please follow up. We do have, in fact, the email address here on the screen. You should see it. Of course, I pushed the button too many times. There we go. And again, thank you for your attention, and look forward to seeing you in future webinars. Bye-bye.